we, as readers, are being lied to on a weekly basis. Now, chances are that you have one of these on your shelves. A New York Times best-selling novel. But what does that even mean? Which books get on this list and who decides it? Is it just a matter of sales or is there something more at play? I did a deep dive. But before we get into the juicy stuff, let's first rewind to what exactly is the New York Times best-selling list? According to their own website, the New York Times Bestsellers List, or simply the list, is an authoritatively ranked list of books sold in the United States, sorted by format and genre. So that's easy. It is a list of the best-selling books of that week in the United States. Well, not entirely. Because if you look further on their website, as they already said, there's not just one list. It is a list of lists separated into genre, into format, into topic even. And it's not just a weekly list, there are monthly bestseller lists as well. And here the problem starts. First of all, there is a distinction between genres. But the thing is, not all genres are on there. Depending on the genre a book falls in, it has a higher or lower chance to get on one of those lists simply because it is a certain genre. And there's more at play, because books are also separated depending on their format. There is, for example, a distinction made between hardbacks and paperbacks. So that means if a book comes out in both formats, sales might be divided over those two formats instead of just going all into one paperback. Now this means if a book is published in both a paperback and a hardback format, then sales numbers will be divided over both. Now this can make a huge difference. If one book comes out only in paperback and sells 1,000 copies, then it will rank higher than another book that comes out in both hardback and paperback and sells 700 copies in both. Yes, our second book has sold more copies in total, but it will rank lower than the first because it sold only paperbacks. And this is one of the main problems with the New York Times bestseller list, because no one really knows where those numbers come from and what it actually means. Again, according to their own website, the New York Times says that their rankings reflect unit sales reported on a confidential basis by vendors offering a wide range of general interest titles published in the United States. So every week they poll a number of booksellers and bookselling platforms and ask them which books are selling best. But these numbers are not really what they seem. Pre-order sales, for example, do contribute to the first week of sale numbers. So this means if a marketing team or an author puts all of their marketing effort into selling pre-order sales, then the first week will be great for them. And they might just appear in the New York Times bestsellers list. Does this mean they have sold X number of books in the first week? No, it doesn't. And this is the explanation why many books appear for 1 week in the list and then the second week they vanish again, because simply those pre-order sales do not contribute anymore. And then there is the matter of which book-selling platforms and which bookstores do they query. Now the New York Times is very secretive about it. And they claim it is because they do not want people to game their list. And that got me wondering, can you game the list? Can you wriggle, manipulate, sabotage the list in such a way that you can pay for your book to get on there? The short answer is yes. Yes, you can. There are several cases known to us throughout the history of the New York Times bestselling list where people actually did just that. They paid for their book to appear in the list. And apparently, you can do so in many ways. In the summer of 2017, the book A Handbook for Mortals by YA author Lani Sarem made history. This was an unknown self-published book. No one had heard of it, no one had even read it. And all of a sudden, one morning, it appeared at number 1 on the New York bestsellers list. Allegedly, it sold 18,000 copies in its first week, which for a self-published book is bollocks. So a lot of people got suspicious. How could a book that no one had read, that no one had even heard of in the YA community, end up on spot number 1? Now, how did she do it? Simply by paying for it. Lani Sarem hired a third party, a company that is specialized in air brackets, creating bestsellers. They somehow knew which bookstores and which book vending platforms the New York Times was targeting, and they just started buying in bulk. And by exactly targeting those stores, that the list uses, it somehow seemed that this book was a new rising star. And yes, there was so much confusion and so much commotion around this book that the New York Times was forced to remove it from their list after 24 hours. But she had shown that it was possible, so others did it as well. Another great example is Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump used a different way, but the same principle adheres. He ordered his hotels to buy in his book The Art of the Deal in bulk and leave it as a present on the pillow of the hotel guest. So in a way, he bought his own book, and he did it in such a big way that it made the New York Times bestselling list. Now, both examples show that if you have the money and the funds to back your own book, then you can easily buy your way onto the list. But there are different, more creative ways as well. When Mitt Romney ran for president, he was doing book tours. Now, as part of these book tours, he negotiated as a fee that whomever booked him for public speaking, for doing a book tour, had to buy, again, in bulk, a certain number of his books. Yes, they could sell them afterwards, but in most cases they just ended up with a large stock of Mitt Romney books. But he didn't care, because his sales numbers were up every time he did a book tour, every time he did a public appearance, and he weaseled his way again onto the list. So, can you buy your way on the list? Yes, you definitely can. Now, the New York Times knows this, and they have, throughout the years, seen many cases of people sabotaging their list, gaming their list in such a way that their book should not be on there. So now the New York Times uses the dagger symbol. If you see a book with a dagger symbol next to it, then this means that they themselves are not sure this book should be on there, but the numbers say so. So that's easy then. The list is a numbers game which can be played and gamed to your advantage. Well, again, not quite. Because many authors throughout the history of the list, back then, in the 80s and even today, have complained and even sued the New York Times because their book was not on the list despite high sales numbers. Now, the most famous case is probably the case against William Peter Blatty, the author of The Exorcist. Now, he claimed that he sold enough copies to be on the list, but he wasn't there, so there was either an oversight or deliberate sabotage. So he sued the New York Times. And he lost the case. He lost the case on a simple matter. The New York Times claimed that their list is curated and thus falls under the Freedom of Speech Act. The courts agreed and they walked off freely. But what does this mean? Because if the list is curated, then that means it's not just numbers. It is opinions. And this of course begs the question, whose opinions? By which standards are books being judged? Are there separate categories? Again, we do not know. There are many theories, but none is proven. A few years ago, the Esquire magazine did a deep dive into this matter. And they claim there is both an editorial and a financial bias. Again, I should say allegedly, because none of this is proven. Now, in their interviews with several people from the publishing industry, there is a clear consensus. Which books get on the list is influenced by editor preference, by connections an author or a publishing house may have, and perhaps many other factors. It is also influenced by a financial gain. Now, the New York Times does gain affiliate marketing fees from any books sold through their website. Now, while I don't have a problem with them doing so, it does beg the question that if it is in their own interest, in their own financial interest, to publish the books that they think are going to do best. Some books might be good, but some books earn you more. So if we summarize, the New York Times bestselling list is a list of lists with a genre and format bias, depending on numbers that can be gamed, and influenced by editorial and financial interests. Now, all this leaves us with one last question. Does this matter? Yes? Yes, it does. Because market research shows that the New York Times bestselling list still sells books. If a book manages to get on the list, it has better chances to do well. That simple blurb, that simple sentence that says that a book is a New York Times bestseller, make it sell more copies. The New York Times bestsellers list is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Buyers are still influenced by it, so authors want to get on there. And as long as that's the matter, people will continue to game the list. As a summary, the New York Times Bestsellers List is a marketing tool that is designed to sell books and earn the New York Times money. And the keyword here is design. Although it is far from transparent, we know to a certain degree it is curated. It is biased and it is influenced. Sadly enough, it is still a very important tool that many people use to decide which book they are going to buy. And as long as this continues, so will the scams, the lies and the attempts to weasel your way into it. Yes, there is the dagger symbol which warns consumers that some books might have had a bit of help getting on there, but this is not enough. The New York Times Bestsellers List should be either fully transparent or fully curated. And I'm curious now, do you use bestseller lists to decide which books you're going to buy next? And are you influenced by little blurbs on book covers like this when you buy books? Let me know down below in the comments, and while you're there, do leave a like. I hope you've enjoyed this video, thank you for watching, and if you want some actual honest book recommendations for a change, do check out this video.